We could probably change the name of Wired to Thrun, and we would still have enough to write about every month. So Sebastian was the lead engineer in the Google self-driving car project, which you've all probably heard about. He also, just for laughs, at Stanford, put his grad-level AI course online and opened it up to the public. 160,000 students took it. They signed up from 190 countries. It translated into 44 languages. And that experiment has led to Udacity, which is a company that opens up online education for professors at various colleges. And in addition to that, as the lead of Google's Google X department, he's involved in all sorts of secretive whiz-bang projects that we don't know about, and one that we do, the recently announced Google Glass, which I don't know if you guys saw this video, but we'll describe it in length further, but it's a new interface that involves no keyboards or fingers, really. Anyway, so Sebastian, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's very exciting to have you. So let's start. We've got sort of a tripartite discussion here. We'll start by talking about the self-driving car. Tell me a little bit about where the idea for this project came from. You know, what inspired you to build a car that drives itself?
I came to Stanford in 2003, and I was kind of out of work at the time. I had finished my research at Carnegie Mellon. I wanted to do something new, and this DARPA Grand Challenge came along, where the US government had said, if someone can build a robotic car that can drive itself 100 miles through the desert, we're going to give that person or that team $1 million. So I figured it's an easy thing to do, let my colleagues deal with it. And I went to the first Grand Challenge and watched it. And the cars would go a mile and then crash and burn up in flames. The furthest anyone went was 7 miles. So I got to this point where my testosterone kicked in, and I felt I could do better than that. I can do 8 miles or 9 miles. So I put together a team, not knowing what I'm doing, and I spent the next year on the front seat of a car with writing computer code at the same time, driving the car and so on, until it finally, I guess, won the DARPA Grand Challenge.
I guess it did, yes. And that was 1 year later, right? 2005, you actually completed the whole course.
Yep.
So what changed what weren't people doing in 2004? I mean, that's such a huge delta. What weren't people doing in 2004 that you knew how?
Oh my God, it was amazingly embarrassing. Every time you look back at technology and look back at the past, it looks just really embarrassing what we didn't do, myself included. At the time, very simplified speaking, people had used GPS to guide these cars around.
Right.
But GPS has a certain amount of error. It's like, 20, 30 feet at times. And there was too much error to keep the car centered on a narrow lane. And from 2004 to 2005, what people really reinvented was the ability for the car to see the lane and use more reactive visual feedback to keep the car in the lane. So as a result, they actually stayed on the lane and didn't drive off the lane. And in driving, that makes all the difference.
And these were things like, that's a good tip.
Yeah, keep that in mind. That's
right.
New York.
Yes. So, yeah, right. So, and this is using things like radar and LiDAR and sensors and cameras. And got it. So at some point, you were still at Stanford at this point.
Correct.
And at some point, did Google approach you at that point?
Yeah, so I'd been working at Google kind of part-time. I helped build up Street View and other things, and I helped build up, Google has an internal mapping department that builds maps, so I was involved in that. And at some point, it became clear that there's a much bigger vision here than just chasing cars through the desert, which has to do with all of civilization, right? So all of us drive cars all the time. It's the second biggest expense in the American household is transportation. Cars kill lots of people, cause lots of accidents. People driving cars cause accidents. In this country, it's about 35,000 a year that die. In the world, it's about 1 million people. And I looked at this and felt it shouldn't be that way. I mean, it's the number one killer for young people. We should make cars just safe. And the grand challenge was like the very first moment where we could look at safe driving, because now we moved the driving responsibility from possibly flawed people to, at the time, certainly flawed computers, but at least the chance was there to make these computers really, really good. Moving it from Stanford to Google was kind of a no-brainer. And the reason is, for one, this is a big computer undertaking. It's really about the data, about the machine intelligence. It's not as much about the hardware itself, the car itself. So we needed a partner, an entity that really understands data. And what better place is there at this moment than Google to understand large data centers, information processing, and so on. The second thing that happened with Google is, if you're a college professor, you do fantastic small research project with students, and you raise $500,000 here for research and $500,000 there. It's really hard to get the budget together to put a vast engineering team in place. And something like this requires significant engineering. So going to someone who has deeper pockets than the National Science Foundation and DARPA really helped us in turning this into reality.
Right. And I remember learning about the self-driving car in I think it was a front page story in the Times. I obviously read the New York Times a lot. It was just this sort of shocking story. Like all of a sudden, oh, hey, Google has these self-driving cars and they've been driving them for tens of thousands of miles without any human involvement. It was one of those moments where, one of those, wow, the future is really here moments. How did that come about? We talked a little bit about this before, this sort of unveiling. Was that planned, or?
It was half planned. John Markov, the person from the New York Times who broke the news, is actually a very skilled and wonderful investigative journalist. We've been driving these cars around on public streets for 140,000 miles. And we carefully monitored every single blog post that came out. And of course, there were plenty of pictures taken on Facebook and Twitter and so on of these cars. And people had all kinds of theories. I thought it was like weather stations. There was this ongoing theory that we're doing energy regeneration with this device on the roof.
Right.
If you think about this,
that would have been cool.
Basic physics of driving something along to generate energy from driving along, it's just not a particularly smart way of... But it was more popular than the hypothesis would actually be a self-driving car. And eventually, it became clear. So John contacted us at Google. We invited him over for a test drive. At the time, we had a system that was actually fairly reliable, and he was very impressed. So he talked about goosebumps as one of the physical reaction to being driven by a car. Yeah. So he got really excited, and that was really a wonderful moment for us as a team, because it really meant that we could now be open about it, the world knew about it, and the reception in general was just very, very positive. Absolutely.
Well, let's share some of that. We have a video, I believe, I think it's queued up, of the self-driving car in action. Can we get that on the big screen?
Hey, Nathaniel, how are you? Doing just great. Go ahead, Steve.
Auto driving.
Here we go. Away we go. Look, Ma, no hands.
No hands anywhere.
No hands, no feet. No hands, no feet, no nothing. I love it.
So we're here at the stop sign. Yep. Car's using radars and laser to check and make sure there's nothing coming either way. I find myself looking. Old habits die hard, man. They don't die.
Hey, anybody up for a taco?
Yeah. What do you want to do today, Steve?
I'm all for Taco Bell myself.
All right. Well, let's go get a taco at the drive-thru. And we're turning into the parking lot. Yep. How neat. There we go. Now we kind of creep along here. Does anybody have any money?
I've got money.
No, I've got my wallet right here. You roll down your window and order a burrito. Yeah, push that.
I'm doing very well. How are you today? This is some of the best driving I've ever done.
95% of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind. You lose your timing in life, everything takes you much longer. There are some places that you cannot go, there are some things that you really cannot do. Where this would change my life is to give me the independence and the flexibility to go the places I both want to go and need to go when I need to do those things.
I have to go. Anyway,
Bye now.
it's been nice. It's been nice.
It's really moving. It's hard not to get choked up, and it's also hard not to get hungry for tacos. But so, talk to me about where we are in the state of this development. How long? What are some of the challenges? Are they technological challenges, social challenges? What has to happen for these things to be on the road?
So by far, the biggest challenge remains to be technological. So we are at the point right now where we can drive a couple of thousand miles without a person taking over, but we can't drive a couple of million miles without a person taking over. And that's all the difference. So right now, they're not as safe as a human driver would be. Having said this, I took the car to Tahoe last weekend, and it drove flawlessly. And I was sitting behind it, and I'm a trained safety driver, so I went to special driving school for this, sitting there doing nothing for hours on end. And my wife said the car was a better driver than me. But I ended up being much more relaxed than I normally am when I drive these long distance drives. And it's really a transformational experience. So we are working really hard. Various states have actually, or are passing legislation right now to enable this technology. Nevada has led the charter here by putting legislation and regulation in place that regulates all of this. Florida has passed a bill, and various other states are following. So I think the social acceptance right now and the political acceptance is actually very high, so as long as it works.
Is it legal to do what you did? Is it legal to drive this in California? I assume it must be.
Well, it certainly wasn't illegal. For me, the law is mostly about things you're not supposed to do.
Right.
We made it so that we always had a safety driver behind the wheel and a safety engineer on the side.
Got it.
And they were in control of the car, so we drove it more like an advanced cruise control. So I'm not aware of any laws that we broke, and it seems to me nobody else be aware of this.
Right. Okay. Good. And we've got a lot to. I'm going to have to start talking more quickly because we have so much to get through. But I want to talk a little bit about this idea that you have a higher standard for a computer-driven car, essentially, than a human-driven car. Like, humans are not particularly good at driving cars. But if a self-driving car had the same safety record as humans, nobody would accept it.
I completely agree.
So what's the standard that self-driving cars? Is there a ratio that you're reaching towards?
There's no ratio. I think it's going to be a process, and I hope that the combo of a human driver and a robotic technology will make the entire combo significantly safer, while not just handing over the control to the car itself. And that's something we're working out right now to understand how to best do this. At some level, we have the world's most amazing technology. It's really transformational to be in it. On the other hand, we don't have something we can sell because it's really too weak. It crashes. It would crash too often if we sold it. Right. So it's going to be our homework exercise for the next couple of months and years to figure out how to best meld these things together so we get a product that just really works. I wish to get to the point where there's no accidents caused by our car.
Mm-hmm. Great. I have a lot more to talk about, but we've got 12 minutes to talk about the future of higher education and also Google's approach to innovation. So let's move along.
11:59.
Yes, you're right. And Sebastian, again, we're not going to be able to open this up for questions, but Sebastian will be around for lunch. So again, get him. Okay, let's move on to Udacity. Talk to me about the decision to open up your classroom in the first place. Where did this come from?
So the decision came from watching Sal Khan talk at TED. Anybody here saw Sal Khan speak at TED? Sal
He was
Khan
at last year's conference.
Is one of my heroes. And And he spoke about how his videos that he made for his nieces would be watched by hundreds of thousands of kids around the nation. And I felt embarrassed that my class at Stanford was watched by 200 well-selected Stanford students. So very spontaneously, even without telling Stanford, we basically put this thing online, and in no time got what turned out to be in the end 160,000 students sign up. And then we taught it, and I was extremely skeptical. I felt that the classroom experience is really essential, and small classes are bigger than large classes. And if you go to 160,000, you can't do anything. But to my surprise, 23,000 made it all the way to the end, which is a large number in my opinion.
And this is a graduate level course.
It's a graduate level artificial intelligence class. I mean, there's not that many people caring about AI that I know of. But it was certainly more than all other professors taught in combination. The other thing was really surprising is that of the 200 students in my Stanford class, 170 didn't show up to class anymore. They watched me on video. They could rewind me, they could watch me at any time. They weren't embarrassed to see the same thing twice. And they actually, many of them reported an intimacy. Let me see, anybody here took any class at Udacity so far? No, not yet. Okay, so I keep running into random people doing this. It turns out the digital medium for education has a lot of potential that is currently unharnessed. The way most people think about online education is you videotape the professor and you take that taping, that video and put it online. Right. That's just the same as all of film was about videotaping a stage and putting that online, which was truly, early film was like that. But in film, we now have cinematography, we have amazing effects. In online teaching, what we end up doing, making it super interactive, more like a video game, where we had lots of quizzes and ways to, people can do program software development inside the video medium. And I think there's an opportunity here to go much broader than just what's been known right now.
Well, and it sounds like students were sort of self-organizing into study groups, and it sort of took on a life of its own. Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah, so there was a lot of stuff happening around it. Professors organized classes around it. There was a counter class called Artistic Intelligence. Students gathered and did various kind of like physical sessions. There was a Facebook group, various G+ groups, and so on. So this entire thing spurred a lot of activity in the world.
And how do you grade 200 projects from 200,000 students?
Well, the real question is, how do you recover from a grading mistake? That's much harder because you get 20,000 emails saying, "Professor, you got this wrong." We did all the grading automatically. So we put up multiple choice questions, we put up numerical questions, and now we even have gradable software where people write software and the little robot that we built goes out and grades automatically.
Wow.
That's not perfect. I mean, I wish I could really sit with people one-on-one and do this with 160,000 people. But it's actually much more systematical than most college grading, where TAs tend to grade somewhat randomly. Mm-hmm. And we graded the Stanford students the same way we graded our online students for most parts, so we could compare them and so on. It was really interesting.
And you mentioned that this opened up some ideas of education for you, that one of your students' parents was criticizing you for not letting them retake a test because it was giving them one chance to succeed. Can you talk about that a little more?
I learned a lot about me as an educator, as a lifelong educator. That is, for example, grades. I used grades a lot to give strong students a positive feedback and weaker students negative feedback. And if you look at most students' experience in school or in university, it's usually negative. Usually they work really hard and they get a B, right? And then the next class they move on to, they might not have the necessary prerequisites. So rather than doing it again, which is kind of embarrassing, they move into the next class. In math, that's really fatal. If you don't know what's happening and you got a C, then you have no chance to get an A in the next class. So the entire experience becomes negative. So rather than grading, which is what I did in the beginning, and I had my harsh grading head on as the Stanford professor, I switched it entirely to saying, well, why don't you get everybody to an A+ level? And if it takes students longer, they should just try more. And if they can eventually solve these really hard problems, like the Stanford level graduate problems, then just give them extra time and they can get an A+. So my aspiration right now is to get every student an A+, but still make them work as hard as necessary to get to the skill level.
That's great. So from here, you launched a whole company around this idea, Udacity. Talk to me about what Udacity is.
So Udacity aspires to be a university, and that might be a little bit pretentious, but what we really want to do is end-to-end higher education. And the reason why I believe this makes sense is if you look today the educational field is organized the way a stage play was organized 100 years ago, before we had a medium that provided scale in the movie industry called celluloid, in our case called digital. We have tens of thousands of professors that teach the same stuff year in, year out. Like, it makes no sense to me if a professor teaches a class this year, they would have exactly the same lectures next year again, right? And it makes no sense to me that the professor in this class teaches a class this university, a university over teaches the exact same class. Because of this, I think the current education experience is very mediocre. Not every professor is great. I think there's a lot of professors that do a fine job, but not as good as it could be. In my own education, I had many professors that didn't really know what the state of the art really was, but they taught because they had tenure at my local college. By going digital, we can bring the scale. So if we have 100,000 students per class, what we can do now is we can make a really, really great class. We can invest the money to make the experience really great. We can tailor it to the individual people so they can match the speed of those people. And we can have a community around it that interacts, maybe tens of thousands of students. That vision, to me, is really profound. It also deals with one of the biggest problems in the United States higher education system, which is cost. Student loans is the #1 debt right now for the American people. It's surpassed $1 trillion. It's more than the housing debt or the credit card debt. And the college costs have been going up by a constant 6% per year, whereas the return of investment has actually gone down. The ability to get a great job with an education has actually gone down. So we are clearly in a bubble, and clearly it'll burst. So I hope that a university like Udacity can come to help save it by providing, in this case, we're actually making everything available for free, right? So you can get an entire education for free right now in computer science online at Udacity. You don't need a college loan at all. I really hope to use the scalability of digital media to bring back to people great high-quality education.
So, and are these courses accredited right now?
They're not accredited, and we're working on that.
Got it. And
absolutely.
And is this scalable to, for instance, the public high school system, this model?
Look, I think the word is still out there. I'm extremely excited, not just Udacity, but many other companies are playing with ideas and experimenting in this space. Mm-hmm. Certainly Salman Khan, who's one of my heroes, has been leading the nation in doing this. And I think we should do this. We should be innovative in the educational space. If you think about what's happening in education today, it's not that dissimilar from the way it was organized 1,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. The lecture is still the primary means of education in colleges, which was exactly what happened when the first university started in Bologna in Italy 1,000 years ago. It's amazing how much the educational system has been robust to innovation, whereas everybody else is falling to digital media and is becoming more efficient. Classes are just the same way they were 10, 20, 50, 100 years ago. So for me, I'm super excited to see many different companies in that space playing with ideas. We should be open-minded about it. We should try these things out. I have a hunch that what we come out with will be significantly more economical. Education will be much, much cheaper, like orders of magnitude cheaper. Right now, our costs per students per class like $1 as opposed to $1,500, which is what good colleges charge. And as a result, we can reach people in all trades in their life, in continuing education, around the world, everywhere.
Now, is anything lost by the part of being a college student is being around other college students and having those sort of social connections. When you remove the physical, cohabitation of it, for instance, is something lost in that? How do you keep that?
You mean all these wild parties and finding a living mate and so on?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so nothing is perfect. So if you should never think of a new invention like digital media in education as a complete replacement of the old. Like there's beauty in physical presence, and that is certainly being affected. Having said this, in this day and age, many of the college kids and high school kids hang out more in social chat rooms and media and Facebook and G+, than they hang out in the physical world together. Mm-hmm. There's profound changes in society. I think we're going to emerge with a different model in the end. We're going to emerge with a model where we don't carve out 4 years in your life as your educational phase and then say, from there on, you don't need any more education, you can just do your job. We're going to come up with a model where maybe the initial education is shorter, but as you do your job, you can stay educated really easily. You take your tablet with you, you learn on the bus, in these short moments of your day where you have a minute to spare, and then learning becomes a lifelong endeavor. And that's going to be very different quality, and I agree, it's going to be harder for dating and finding the right boy or girl. That we're not going to replace that easily, but so be it.
Right. All right, so great. So I know you've got a 4-year-old son. I have a 3-year-old son, and so now we've taken care of their driver's license and we've taken care of their college debt, which is
that is good.
My hat goes off to you. Thank you for. I'm just not going to save anything now. That's great. All right, so let's move on to Google X. It's a shame that we don't have the video with us, but maybe you can describe, maybe you can paint a picture for us of. Have people seen this video of the Google Glass project? I see some yeses and some nos. So for the nos, maybe you can describe it for us.
So Google X in a single sentence is my ambition, and not just my ambition, Larry and Sergey's ambition, to really do moonshot type projects and not just shooting for the moon, but bring the moon back to Earth and launch products. The most recent one we've announced has been Google Glass, our third project. We did indoor maps and self-driving cars before. And it was, in the beginning, this crazy thing, like how can you bring a computer out of your pocket to a place where you have it with you all the time. And if you looked around at the time, there was something called heads-up displays, a very kind of technical term. And they're usually like glass blocks, so you flop into your eyes, and you wouldn't see much other than these things. And they would crunch down your nose because they're really heavy. And they had little projectors inside, and people talked about augmented reality, how cool that all would be. So we started saying, well, that's kind of nice, but not what I want in my life. How can we think about a technology more as a liberating piece of technology? How can we make what Jack Dorsey calls technology that goes away, that you don't see? And then we realized we're really bothered by our phones. I am, personally. If I take it out of my pocket to take a picture, I have to take it out, I have to unlock it, I have to write the app, fire up the camera app, finally take the picture. It takes me 40 seconds or so to do this. Why can't I just take a picture with basically right on my eye, if I don't have the camera with me that other people can see through my eyes as I go through the world? So we came up with this concept of building a super lightweight computer that is with you in your face all the time. It's called Google Glass. It's a project so far, it's not a product. And what it provides us is a display that you can see information. It has a camera, so it's really easy to take a picture. I did this on Charlie Rose, so just during my interview, I took a picture of him. I think I'd be the first to ever insult him by taking a picture of him live doing the show. And it has also an ears-free component, so you can make phone calls without having anything in your ear, using a speaker that touches your head, which turns out to be a really magical experience when you try it out. So the idea is, while we all want to be connected, we want to be in the information flow, we also want to be in the physical world. We want to have our hands free, our eyes free, our ears free. Google Glass is our best shot right now at Google to achieve that.
And you know, I suppose the devil's advocate take on this is we are already sort of barraged by various digital media, and we can't get away from it. And how, you know, why do we need a constant overlay of digital media in our vision?
I think that is a really legitimate concern. And if I looked at the feedback we got when we got to the public and listened to people, I think distraction has been the #1 concern. So we've been really looking into, can we make this device there for you when you want it and need it, but not distract you? Mm-hmm. And in our prototypes, we changed a whole bunch of things. So for example, in addition to being a camera, we also use it for communication. So if someone texts me, the message actually pops up, I can read it. We've now moved to a point where when I'm in a situation where I just don't want to be distracted, I have the freedom to just let go, so that I can live my life to the fullest. And if I'm on my own and wishing to go through the information that I maybe missed in the last 10, 15, 20 minutes, I can go back. And it's an ongoing development effort. I really love to hear from people. The reason why we went public, by the way, is, for one, we wanted to wear it in public, but also we wanted to get feedback from everybody who might be our future customers, to really understand what are your concerns, what are your aspirations, what do you associate with a device like this, what is your creativity. And I think this distraction concern really came up, and we really are looking very systematically into this right now.
I'm going to just, one last question. We're already a little over time. So the theme here is disruption. How do you create a department whose job is to land on the moon every year?
I can tell you every single employee that I have, every report that I have, my very first conversation is rule #1, disobey your manager. Don't listen to your manager. And they all come to me and say, I hope we're all getting this. Sebastian, I came to Google to work with you. How are you telling me this? I don't believe you. And a year later, they come back to me. Every single one says, now I understand. So I think a lot of it is about, this is the age of disruption. There's an amazing number of opportunities right now. And in the execution of disruption, many, especially large companies, have a hard time doing this because it seems like everybody has an opinion, right? And we make it really hard for people to get out of this aura of opinions and directions. If you have a manager, has a VP, has a SVP and a CEO, you have a whole stack of opinions. What I try to do is I shield my teams from those opinions. I really try to get people maximum operating space, give them a vision that I believe in and that they believe in, and it takes a lot of work to get a good vision, like Google Glass, and then they just do their thing. And then they come back a year later, and something amazing usually emerges.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Sebastian. This was great.
Thank you.